I'm very grey. I've been violated at college. I've had so I had a root glow a few months ago because we put a 9% on, and then obviously with the grey. And what I've been doing is, just because I've got a colour fresh, because I've got quite a bit of breakage from hair extensions. I lost a lot from hormone imbalancing.
So as Sophie was just saying there, lots going on, lots of damage, lots of the hair's feeling a bit tired. There's actually a really quick, easy fix for Sophie's hair in a lot of ways here. What we need to do is get some highlights back into this darker area through here. That will also help to diffuse the natural highlights that Sophie's got, the white hairs, or sparkly ones, as someone said to me recently when I was teaching, which I thought was a great term. Yeah, so sorting that out is going to be my primary thing, getting that lightness through there, breaking up this darker band. What we're going to do is we're going to scatter highlights throughout Sophie's hair, so because obviously the banding goes all the way through for obvious reasons, because it was from a root tint. So we're going to work with Sophie's kind of natural fall. This is kind of what Sophie came in with, and I just like to work with the natural fall of everyone's hair, really. So it kind of splits back from here. So we're going to take a section from that point down towards kind of the back of the ear, and then I'm going to take a section that drops down to the top of the occipital bone and then back along the parietal ridge, and then that's given us kind of a V-shaped section. Which I'll work through diagonally. And then what we're going to do with the back now, we're going to split this into two, and I'm going to weave from about halfway down, and then what that means is it's going to dig into the section, and hopefully you'll be able to clearly see there how that's working. So that's digging into the section, and it's creating like little U-shaped weaves in the hair, which means that I'm going to have deeper saturation through the section. Now Sophie's hair is quite fine, and so this was easier to do on finer hair. But if Sophie had really thick hair, all I would do is I would come closer to the roots and do my weave, and that means I wouldn't dig as far into the hair. We're not going to go really tight to the roots. We're going to go fairly close. We definitely don't want to overlap the ends, that would be suicide. And we need to then take our section and elevate it up slightly, work up towards the root area. Now elevation creates softness, that's it. You said it in your head, I could hear you. Elevation creates softness, so by elevating our section up towards the horizontal at the root area, we're also aiding a softer transition towards the root area. Move those more fragile ends out of the way. I always fold by a third, so then my flap is then stuck to my product, and fold by a third again. Fold my edges if I'm going to be putting a root colour in between. If I'm not going to be putting a root colour in between, then I simply wouldn't bother with that. So then I'm going to take another section. This section is going to be around about an inch in depth. It doesn't need to be particularly fine, this section. It's actually better not for it to be fine. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come halfway down the hair, and we're going to weave our section up and down, up and down, up and down, and then you can see how that digs into the hair, and it creates a lot of V-shaped sections into the hair. Now, the reason we're doing this is, one, it's going to give us better coverage, but two, we don't have to lift it miles and miles, this hair, We're only looking for kind of 2 levels of lift. So I'm using 20 volume peroxide in my lightener. I do work quite fast, so if you work slowly, then just go down peroxide to platinum. So I'm going to continue on with this back quadrant, and I will do this left hand side as well, and then I'll join you again at the crown area where things will change a little bit, but until then nothing's really going to change. So okay, so this is that triangle section in the crown that I was talking about. So we can see along this side we've got a diagonal line. It goes up towards kind of about the high point roughly, but it's cutting back on itself because just the way the hair falls naturally. And then we're going through this side. We're going to just work our way up to the opposite side. Now it doesn't really matter which side you go from, whether it be this side or this side. I'm going to go from this side. Most people work horizontally like this, up towards the crown area. And then you can also work vertically if you're wanting to create like streaks of colour that are coming down and funneling, especially if you're doing like a foliage or something like that. That's quite a nice way of doing it. You can just take vertical sections, stand to the side and foil across this area, and that also works really well too. But this way, you know, when you work the diagonal, you get good coverage and you get nice separation. Now remember, we want to be taking sections that are approximately 1 inch, but what we also want to do is we want to make sure that we're not putting any foils in too close to this foil here. So we want to cut away just a little bit of the old hair there, and we're going to leave that hair, we're not going to touch it, and we're just going to foil through on the diagonal through that side. So pop a clip in there, Bob's your uncle, stand on this side, and then we'll just work our way through that direction. So the same thing as we did previously, we're going to come approximately halfway down the section, and we're going to weave through the section. So what we're going to do is just speed this up a little bit so you guys can just see how I work through this crown area. Onto the top. Now what we're going to create in the top is some separation and definition. So a bit like we were talking about earlier, where how we place our foils will create, you know, separation and definition. We're going to work on the diagonal through here, but we're going to space them out a little bit. Now the diagonal will emphasize softness, but by not working completely vertically, it will eliminate some of the striping effects that can happen when we work vertically up the parting. If we take that weave halfway down like that, we will dig all the way pretty much through to the perimeter. So when the hair goes back, it will look like we've put some highlights in the front, but some very, very soft highlights. But remember, obviously, we really will need to saturate this well for it to get through to the other side of our section. So that's something to bear in mind. Same spacings in between each of the foils as well. That's also something to bear in mind as we go through, just digging through that section, making sure that we get a reasonably chunky weave. What will happen, the blonde will stand out even more against the hair that is around it, and that's a really, really beneficial thing for creating that blonde that pops, because what you need is dark and light for the light to look lighter. So by taking the section and digging through and creating what looks like a fairly chunky highlight, but also leaving that contrasty colour behind, it's going to make our blonde stand out even more. If you come to a roadblock in someone's hair, or you know, you need to make a decision, you need to pivot on what you're going to do, then just be transparent and honest and just say, look, this is what it's doing, this is the choices it's left me with, you know, are you happy for me to proceed in that way? And then at least then you've got kind of verbal confirmation from both parties that, you know, that they're aware that you've made those decisions. Because I think acting, sometimes we just feel the responsibility of just doing, you're the professional, etc. But yes, you're the professional and you're guiding that person to the best possible end result. And if that means that, you know, you need to pivot and change and things might not work out exactly as you had discussed in the consultation, then it's your responsibility to make that person aware of that and let them make an informed decision based on, you know, your professional opinion, and give them the choices that you've got in front of you right now. And I think that's a really, really important thing to remember. So come in, apply my colour to the root area, and then feed it down with my comb. If your sections are getting a little thick, then you just want to make sure that you're either brushing it from side to side or you're lifting the section. Side to side is usually sufficient, and also kind of helps to blend out the hair a little bit too. If we look at the highlights here as we go through, there's just a little area where the highlights stop and there's still a little area of dark, and this is just going to help to diffuse the two. So we're going to dab it on, we're going to dip our brush in, pick up a bead of colour. This is where we want to be really, really clean and tidy with this particular technique. We're going to lift up this section and elevate it over like so, dab on our product like that. We want a fairly generous amount of saturation. That's one of the things that I see a lot of, is not enough product on the root tap area. So it's really, really, really important that we get enough product into the root tap so that it actually saturates and does the job it's intended to. Right then, so we've finished Sophie's hair. It's all done and dusted, and as you'll be able to see from the finished shots here, we've got a much, much softer root colour. We've taken away a lot of that warmth. We've put in some highlights. We did that little root tap, and those things have all helped to kind of consolidate all of those mishaps that Sophie had, move it into a different space. But you know, this is a really nice soft end result that Sophie will be able to wear really easily. If you've enjoyed this episode, found it useful, if you have, hit the thumbs up button, and I'll see you again very, very soon for another episode of Life of Hair.